So if you're in your 30s and you feel like you missed your opportunity to buy a home, I need you to hear this. The average first-time home buyer is now 40 years old. So if you've been thinking, how is everyone else doing this? You're not crazy. It just looks like everyone's buying because you're seeing the highlight reels, but you're not seeing the real reel. And by the way, I'm in my 30s too, so trust me, I get it. This is literally in my group chats with friends. Everybody feels like they're behind one way or another. But here's the thing, your 30s is actually the best time to buy. So instead of giving you generic advice, I'm gonna walk you through the 7 frameworks I use with my own clients to break this decision down logically, if it makes sense to buy or not. So if you're in your 30s, you're gonna wanna pay attention. And mortgage is all I do all day long, so I know these frameworks will help you, and it's helped the other 500 plus families that I've helped. So let's jump into it. With framework number 1, I want you to think about this as a stepping stone, not a dream home. And I can't tell you how many times I chat with somebody, and if you can afford the dream home, please do it. But if you're like, I'm so close, but yet so far, I would recommend looking into the starter home. And starter homes are completely normal. Even if on Pinterest and Instagram, you're seeing all these great, beautiful properties. Like I said, those are the highlight reels. You're not seeing the real reel, right? So the reason why I like the starter home, because it prioritizes financial flexibility over perfection, right? My big ism here at Learn Lending is progress over perfection. If you make enough progress, you will get to where you need to go, right? This article also says 49% of buyers plan to live in their first home for less than 10 years. So you're not alone. So this is why I love the trade up home buying playbook, or basically you start with a starter home and then you upgrade from there. So this reminds me of Ryan. They bought in 2023 and they bought a 2-bed, 2-bath, right? It was their starter home with thought in mind of upgrading in the future. They just didn't know when it was gonna happen. Maybe it was 5 years, maybe it was 10 years, etc. And when we first went down this journey, we knew that, hey, this isn't forever, but it at least makes us closer to our home ownership goals, right? So they ended up buying that starter home, and it's already 3 years, and they're already actually in contract and gonna be closing end of the month. And that's gonna be a 4-bed, 2-bath, a single family house, right? Because their family's expanding, etc. And the cool thing, that journey from 2023 to 2026 was his income was a lot lower, and then he went through all this training, went to K9 training, and now he's gonna get approved and get paid more, therefore he can afford more, right? But it all started with the first house, and then now he's gonna rent that out and have it go up in value and all that fun stuff, right? Now it does take patience, don't get me wrong, but what I love about the starter home first and doing like the trade up home buying playbook is what I call it, is then 5 years, 10 years from now, etc., you can figure out, okay, do I wanna keep this as a rental and I have saved up enough down payment, or do I sell it and then upgrade from there, which is completely normal, and most people end up doing that because they understand that progress is better than perfection. And real quick, if you think you're ready, but you're not sure about buying a house, I would want you to check out the free Homebuyer Readiness Roadmap, which is down below. It takes less than a minute to figure out if you're ready. And also, if you're not ready, I have customized videos just for you to get you from a C to a B to an A, right? So it tells you exactly what to do, so that way you can be ready. So again, it's my gift to you. Click the link down below and I'll catch you in there. All right, so let's move on to framework number 2, which is let's bust the 20% down myth, okay? So you definitely don't need the 20% down. It's a huge misconception. I'm gonna give you some ideas in a few moments, but first I'm gonna go over what's the minimum down payments, then I'm gonna go over strategies, right? So conventional is 3% down if you're a first-time home buyer. If you're not, you can put 5% down. FHA, you can do 3.5% down, and you don't need to be a first-time home buyer. VA, if you're eligible, like a veteran or active duty service member, thank you for your service, 0% down. And with USDA, 0% down as well. That's gonna be like rural areas. There's usually a map that you can look up and stuff like that. But the other side of the spectrum of like, hey, well, that's great. What if I have more money saved up? What should I do? And I'll give you some examples of, even if you have the 20% down, it may be smarter to not overstretch and put slightly a little less, right? So usually what I recommend is like, hey, let's explore some options of what does 15% down look, right? And the reason why a lot of people want to put 20% down is because, one, they think of it, or they think the private mortgage insurance is going to be some of this crazy number. And sometimes when you crunch the numbers, it might be like 20 bucks a month, 40 bucks a month, depending on your loan amount, purchase price, all that stuff, right? But sometimes it's not that bad. So what I usually recommend is like, what is your payment at 15% down with everything included? And then on top of it, what is 20% down? And then I try to figure out, would you be more comfortable having the extra 50 grand in your bank account? Because just in case something, breaks, most people would say, yeah, because home ownership has some unknowns for sure, like repairs and stuff like that, right? So I always recommend try to avoid draining your bank account. But long story short, you don't need to put 20% down. You actually want to figure out, what is my actual payment based on my comfort payment goals, current interest rates, and the purchase price that I'm looking at. Okay, so we just talked about down payment and figuring out how much we should save. Does it make sense to put 20% down? Or you can put as little down as 3.5%, right? Yeah, framework number 3 is renting or buying. What makes sense for you, right? That's the $1 million question. So I want to first bust the myth that buying a home is all about financially making sense, right? It is not the situation, right? Renting isn't throwing money away. It is creating flexibility. It does put a roof over your head. So I just want to be clear on that, right? Now, there's 2 parts of the equation that I want everyone in their 30s, even 20s, 40s, 50s, whatever, right? When you're buying a house, this is not talked about, there's the financial aspect of it, and then there's the life that doesn't live on paper. So the personal reasons, right? You want to add both parts to the equation. Now, some people, I do fall for this because I used to be an engineer. It's very analytical, right? I just look at the numbers and, don't care about the personal side. But what I've come to learn is there's actually a lot more to life than ROI and finances, right? So I encourage you to look at both sides of the equation, right? So technically, yes, if you're renting, you're paying someone else's mortgage. So that is true, but it does create a lot of flexibility, right? So what I usually look at, if you're thinking about home buying or renting and you're kind of debating, first test is, do I think I'm gonna be here for at least 3-5 years? The further along you are, like if it's for sure gonna be 5 years, meaning I'm not gonna move because I don't plan on having kids, or my kids aren't gonna move school district anytime soon, I would say it's gonna make more sense to be on the purchasing side if you can, because you're gonna have enough time for home values to appreciate, right? Instead of like trying to buy and sell in a year, right? So the other thing that I want you to look at when you're kind of comparing both is, usually I like to look at apples to apples, which is, hey, if I'm renting a studio right now, your payment will always be less than pretty much any house that you buy, right? So if you're gonna be buying like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single family house, we want to compare that 3-bed, 2-bath rental and kind of compare that the same, right? So always apples to apples when you're kind of figuring out the financial ROI, right? Now, obviously, if you're going from a studio to a lot more space, you might personally feel better, right? Or it might bring you more joy and stuff like that. So those are 2 things you want to add and kind of, balance out. And talking about that, this actually reminds me of an article done by LendingTree, and it actually talked about why people purchased. And I thought it was actually quite shocking. And really, the top 3 had nothing to do with like tax advantages, wealth building, or anything like that. It was flexibility, sense of ownership, and then just having your best bud, your pets, right? And Indy's over there, she's sleeping while I'm filming this here, by the way. So, but yeah, that's like one of the main reasons, top 3 reasons that people purchase. This actually reminds me of one of my close friends, Cedric and Ash, and one of their friends found a stray dog just kind of wandering around and knocked on all the neighbors' doors, and really no one claimed the puppy, right? Which is kind of sad. So, my friends, they actually adopted him, and their landlord was actually unwilling to budge on the pet rules, which I don't blame them. It is what it is, right? So they had to figure out their housing situation. It's like, hey, this kind of all happened for a reason, and we were thinking about getting a dog, and here we are, a dog kind of fell into our lap. Like, what do we do, right? So in that situation, their rental, they didn't allow dogs, right? So they ended up purchasing, so that way they could, keep their best friend, right? So they kicked out the landlord, and then they kept the dog. Okay, so let's talk about framework number 4, which is expanding your search radius. And this is gonna help you find more affordable homes, generally speaking, right? And I'm talking about the cities and locations that I'm more familiar with, which is, let's call it San Diego. We call it Central San Diego, right? And then you have like North County, which is still nice places. And then as you go further away from central San Diego, or okay, you expand your search, right, to maybe 30-minute commute to maybe even 60-minute commute, you might find more affordable homes. So your commute might not be easy right now, and it might take some time to adjust, but like I said, you want to balance both. What's the financial and what's the personal aspect of it? Why am I purchasing, right? And in San Diego, there's this kind of, I would call it city, kind of north of it, about an hour away, called Temecula, right? So it is further away, but much more affordable than central San Diego. I would say like the regular San Diego, right? Now, obviously, like everyone had this idea, so now Temecula got more expensive too, right? So I guess if you're early enough into the moving wave, you'll make some good money. But yeah, that's an example of like what I'm talking about, expanding your search radius. And being early, I want to talk about Mario. He's actually my barber, and I just got a haircut about a few days ago. So hopefully it shows on the camera, right? Mario, if you're watching this, thank you so much. But he bought in Temecula, and this was years ago. I can't even remember, like maybe 5 years ago or something like that. So he bought really early, right? But the commute, he definitely had to get adjusted to. And I was talking to him about like making this video, and then I was like talking to him, was like, hey, like, are you experiencing this? Because like some people, they get used to their commute. And he was like mentioning like, yeah, like actually, ironically, I used to not like my commute because it was like an hour, and now he actually really enjoys it. And here's what's interesting. I asked him like, why is that? Like, are you like, what are you doing in the car, right? He's like, well, aside from the typical podcast, right? He's like, I actually use that time to catch up with friends and family. It's like a forcing function of, he does like 30 minutes of catching up with friends, family, talking about their day, and he has their undivided attention. Therefore, he's actually listening and actively listening, right? And then the other 30 minutes is like self-growth or education, right? I'm like, wow. So it's like a forcing function for him, instead of, you know, he was like, I'd probably be at home just sitting on the couch if my commute was any shorter, right? So I was like, dude, that's great. So he turned a constraint into a resource, which I thought was very interesting. Okay, framework number 5 is an income strategy, okay? So this is a little of a spicier strategy. Now, please note, I want us to win, and that's why I'm presenting this idea. Now, I'm not saying it's gonna work for everybody, but I want you to think about the concept. So an article came out by ADP, which is a massive payroll company, right? Just recently, saying that loyalty is costing you income, I should say, right? It's making you less each year. So they did a study where those who went into a new job or switched jobs actually make more than those who stay put, which is a very sad truth. And me being a business owner as well, actually, that's why I started my business, because like I was like not enjoying how much I was working, and then etc. and all that stuff. But I feel so bad for that. But it's just like, unfortunately, it's the game, right? That's the game. I wish more people would promote internally. That's what we try to do as well. I'm not saying we're perfect, but unfortunately, that is the game sometimes. So sometimes switching jobs will allow you to have higher income, which will allow you to save up more, pay off more debt, etc. And like most things in life, you'll get used to the new job, the new commute, etc. So it's something to look into. Maybe that small annual raise or something like that might compound over time. And that's actually what Brad and Lindsay, which was one of my past clients, and they bought probably like 4 years ago. And I was in the same industry actually before I got into mortgages. I was an aerospace engineer, and they were engineers as well. And they did the kind of same playbook of like every 3-ish years or so, they would move to a different company, right? In the aerospace company, like the big 3 or 5 of them, right? And I would say that based on their strategic moves, they are getting paid more than other people who have stayed at the same job, which is kind of sad and unfortunate, but I kind of see it as the data there, right? So it's something to look into. Now, I'm not saying that every job is perfect, but it's something where if the pain of change is greater than the pain of staying the same, you'll make the move and stuff like that. Framework number 6, which is house hacking, which is something that I actually did in my very first house in Florida, and I actually house hacked it. It was a 4-bed, and it's crazy to think that my payment was like $2,000, like nearly 10 years ago. And I was like, that is so expensive, which is crazy to think right now, right? Inflation. And it was a 4-bedroom, and I lived in the smallest one because I was so focused on making sure I can save up so much and continue to invest, sacrifice a lot on the personal side, right? So I lived in the smallest one, rented out all the other rooms. So I lived pretty much rent free. I think my mortgage was like, after the rent that was coming in, was like $100 or $200 or something like that. So it's a great idea for anyone who's in their 30s that already has a roommate. Okay, so if you already have a roommate and you're in your 30s and you have the down payment, this is a like no-brainer idea. I would absolutely do it every single day, twice on Sunday. This strategy again, because I think it really set me up for success. Like it allowed me to save up so much so fast. And I did it for like 2 years or so, 3 years. And honestly, it flew by. It flew by. Yeah. Yes, it kind of sucks sometimes if you have like 3 or 4 roommates and significant others, right? If you multiply that. But at the end of the day, those were some of the good times, right? So I would say if you're comfortable having roommates right now in your 30s, it is a no-brainer to look into house hacking. So framework number 7, last one here. If you're in your 30s, don't wait for the rates as your all-ending plan, right? So this reminds me of Angel, bless your soul, Angel. I actually chatted with him like last month, and he started this process nearly 10 years ago about home buying, right? So I remember he was mentioning, like I can't remember how he exactly said it, but he mentioned like, man, I'm like kicking myself in the butt that I wish I would have pulled the trigger 10 years ago, right? And then 10 years ago, everything was super expensive. And then he was like, Nathan, and this is in San Diego, right? 10 years ago. And now it's like, Nathan, everything's still so expensive. I'm like, yeah, I know, Angel. I'm so sorry. I don't have control over that, but like everything's always going to be expensive, as unfortunate as it sounds, because of inflation, right? Generally, things get more inflate, right, over time. Income, right? I asked him, are you making more money than 10 years ago? He said, yes. Inflation. Have the house has gone up over 10 years? He said, yes. But what's interesting, and I want you to think about this, like I really want you to think about this, is inflation increases your income, or it makes your income go up over time. But then because everything else increases over time, cost of goods, etc., it doesn't feel like that much. But I want you to think about what happens with inflation, with mortgage debt, or just debt in general, right? That $2,000 a month payment 10 years ago, or $1,500, whatever, right, feels like nothing right now, right? And as crazy as it sounds for Angel, like your $4,000 a month payment will feel like $2,000 a month today, like 15 years from now, right? Because inflation also pushes debt down. So I want you to think about that as you're kind of going through the market and kind of like understanding that, hey, this might not be, my perfect house. It's the starter house, like framework number 1. And then also understanding that inflation will make it feel more affordable with your mortgage debt 10, 15 years from now, so we can kind of pair that two together, right? So overall, if we kind of boil down the 7 different frameworks here, I want us to focus on buying smart, not necessarily fast, right? Now, we don't need to wait for perfection. I think we should focus on progress and just doing the activities of progressing, and then you'll get there, right? So what I don't want you to do is freeze and give up because of this analysis paralysis. But I also don't want you to panic buy. There's always like a happy medium kind of in between. So remember, it's not a race. If you set kind of like a 5 to 10 year goal of like, hey, I'd really like to be in this spot. This is where my career I would like my career to be. You'd be very surprised what you can accomplish in 5 to 10 years. I remember I did this 5, 10 years ago. I'm astonished at what we have accomplished just in general. So it's crazy to think. And then you're going to reflect back, guess what? In your 30s and your 20s, like anyone who's watching this, you look back in your 20s or your teens, those were the good days, right? But I know when you're going through it, you're like, man, this is tough. College is tough. High school is tough, right? But then you're looking back now, retroactively, you're like, man, these are the good days. So guess what? In 10 years from now, you're going to reflect back like 30s was the good days, right? So just make it a good day and use these frameworks to get closer to home ownership. And as always, I try to make the best videos in the mortgage and real estate education space. If you've liked this, please give it a like or subscribe if you want to watch more videos like this. And YouTube is recommending this video right over here, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.